Okay, aloha kako, mahalo nui to all of you for coming to our webinar, our talk story today. I'm Melissa Kimera. I am the coordinator for the Pacific Fire Exchange Program, which is a joint program of the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization and the University of Hawaii. And my job is really as a wildfire science communicator. I do want to take just a moment to explain what we're going to be doing here today and to acknowledge and honor, to acknowledge the extraordinary devastation that has taken place, that is still, people are still dealing with on Maui. And we want to honor the extraordinary efforts of folks out there, doing that work. I do want to just explain what this meeting is. It's not a community meeting per se. This really is a webinar panel. But we do, however, want to invite you to voice your concerns, your project ideas, and your priorities, and to drop your questions in the chat box. So we have an amazing panel of community leaders here today to share with us some of the work that they have been doing. But before we get to that, I do want to introduce our executive director, Elizabeth Pickett. Elizabeth, she's our fearless leader at Hawaii Wildfire, and she is going to tell us about why this important work is happening and give us a bit of the history. So I'll hand it over to you, Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. And hello, aloha to everyone who is joining us today or might be watching the recorded version of this. We had already planned this gathering long before what has happened in Lahaina and all the fires on Maui and Hawaii Island. And it's been out there in the media. You might know that for a very long time, our organization has been working on wildfire planning, education, mitigation, risk reduction. And as part of that effort to lay the foundation for understanding what all the work that needed to be done, that continues to need to be done, we wrote community wildfire protection plans. And those gather up lots of different kinds of people: fire agencies, forestry, land managers, community members, ranchers, farmers, all kinds of people. And we get together and we look at the hazards that exist in that area. And we come up with a prioritized list of concerns and actions that need to take place in those areas. One of the buckets that we heard over and over again was community outreach and education and programming. And we have made a lot of progress on that side. We have lots of materials available to how to protect your home and yard from wildfire. We have our Firewise Communities program to support neighborhood level action. There's a lot of information and programming in that direction. So you can contact us later or look at our website to follow up on that piece. But another one of the buckets was that fuels management, vegetation management is a priority risk reduction measure that we need to get a handle on and start piloting new ways of taking care of our fuels and managing our lands at the landscape level, because fire can only travel where there is fuel. That is actually the chemical equation. It's the only way. The fire cannot take place. The chemical reaction cannot take place without an ignition, oxygen, and fuel. And fuel is something we can do a lot about. So in 2018, 2019, we did a lot of work with those who manage lands to understand what current fuels management was happening, and then to take a look at that with workshops all over the state to zoom out and try to see what is really needed here at the landscape level. We have a patchwork of private lands and communities, and there's all sorts of work to be done, but how do we do this in a zoom out way, in a way that makes sense for the landscape, rather than thinking about each parcel and each silo in each unit in each jurisdiction, because fire doesn't think about that as it's traveling across. So what you're going to hear today are some of the folks we've worked with. We were able to work with, starting off with a funder, we were able to get funding from the U.S. Forest Service, Cooperative Fire, to do a few pilot projects that actually engaged multiple partners in their area to start to pilot what this looks like, to do collaborative vegetation management as opposed to parcel by parcel. So what you're going to hear today are people who've followed through with that, who've used those Forest Service funds to get some projects completed. And I want to invite everybody to listen and learn and think through, maybe think through some of the challenges, think through how we can possibly scale this up. And what it's really going to take is everyone's participation and kind of like good neighbor teamwork to really manage the fuels at the scale that we need to reduce fire risk in the ways that are necessary to protect our people and our places. So this is just our version and our organization's version of getting started. We got some funds, we're trying to pilot this, but our partners on the ground that you'll hear from today are the ones who really did the heavy lifting to make this happen. And they're going to be sharing how it went, what they did, what they've learned. And we invite everybody to think through all the next pieces, because we are literally building the path as we walk it, as we try to scale up all this vegetation management across the state. So with that, I just want to thank our partners who've done so much of this work, and thank you for being here today, and thank you for everyone who came to enjoy this process of continuing to learn so we can do better and better.
Mahalo, Elizabeth. Just to quickly go over our agenda, we are going to hear from 3 amazing speakers. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. You know, they're all from different islands. We're going to be giving them about 15 minutes each to talk about the work that they have been doing. They'll give a presentation for about the first 10 minutes, but please just put your questions in as they're talking, as you're thinking through it. We really encourage you to do that. And then we'll spend the last 5 minutes with each person answering some of those questions. And we, you know, at Kalamai, if we can't get to everybody, but we really do want to hear from all of you, what your questions are, what your concerns are, all of it. So please go ahead, put that in the chat. Yeah, we're excited to get started. So with that, we do want to start with Robbie Justice, our first guest here with Forest Solutions, Hawaii Island. Forest Solutions is actively working on Kauai landscapes, approximately, I think, 1 to 2 times a week. And Queen Emma Land Company has been supporting the management of the Kauai watershed since the early 2000s, including coordinating watershed protection and soil erosion mitigation projects, as well as wildfire prevention and management. And Robbie's going to talk a bit about what you have been doing over there. And with that, I turn it over to you, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I prepared some slides so we could go through that. Yeah, is it sharing? Okay, yeah, so we use this funds to I guess implement a fuel break in the Kauai area on Queen Emma land. So we did this in collaboration with Queen Emma Land Company, Parker Ranch, and Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization. So where this is, so Kauai is located in South Kohala in the Ahupua'a of Kauai Hikina. There's several communities in the immediate area, including Waimea, Kauai, and Waikoloa Village. And these areas are known for their extreme dryness and pretty frequent wildfires. And the lower section of this property is super, super dry. So it only gets around 8 to 17 inches of rain a year. And it usually experiences pretty strong winds over 25 miles an hour pretty often. And so the highway right there, Highway 19, is used by over 10,000 people pretty much daily to commute between Kauai and Waimea. And this highway combined with this super dry and windy area makes it super susceptible to fire. This is the 2014 HWMO wildfire incident map. And you could see like the areas where wildfire incidents happen generally follow the roads. And so this area is highlighted just because it's right next to a highway and it's surrounded by super dry grass. The work that was done was establishing a fuel break between Highway 19 and the large grass pasture on Queen Emma lands. This would allow for the separation between the high ignition point and the large flammable pasture that was that is on Queen Emma lands. The surrounding community would benefit from basically having another additional layer of defense from a massive wildfire. And this area was pointed out as a high priority area by HWMO, Hawaii Fire Department, as part of Queen Emma Land Company's existing grant with the Department of Health to mitigate fire and then consequently sediment into Pelikane Bay. The project had quite a bit of moving parts to it, so it involved collaboration and planning with Queen Emma Land, Parker Ranch, the fire department, and HWMO in order to get the specific target area for mitigating wildfire and then ultimately to install the fuel break. Much of this initial planning work was done prior to this funding as part of the Hawaii Department of Health 319 grant, which brought partners together and it supports other infrastructure improvement like ranch roads and other fire breaks. As well as doing this, it also helps us with our collaboration with Parker Ranch and Queen Emma Land Company to, I guess, use projects like this or implement projects like this. Prior to installing the fuel break, we went through the area to identify what different problems we'd encounter while installing the fuel break. And we took the whole area, which came out to be 2.1 miles. We looked at the terrain and the plants that we would be, I guess, treating in order to get the correct treatment, as well as the amount of fuel that it would take us to do this project. A key part of our strategy was using a pre-emergent treatment on the area after. This would limit our need to follow-up treatment, I guess, in the immediate future. And logistics with Parker Ranch was done in order to limit our impact on their active cattle operations. And as you can see here, there was a really overgrown utility pole access road that we utilized as the base of our fuel break. The road kind of provided access to the area, but it didn't serve as an appropriate fuel break on its own. So we determined that we needed to widen it to 30 feet to basically clear it and make sure that it would function as a fuel break. A key part of our strategy for the fuel break was to use the right tools for this place and this area. An example of this would be our choice to not use large earth-moving equipment. This would have expedited the process, but it would also have caused like major land disturbance, which would have caused a large amount of sediment to be eventually dumped into Pelikane Bay. So understanding this, we utilized our manpower and our weed eaters to do the initial clearing of the grass. And our choice of cord was basically, it's basically any cord that's thick and it has a wire surrounded by plastic. And this type of cord lasts way longer than basically any type of other commercial grade cord. So we chose using the cord instead of using a blade also to mitigate the chance of sparking and creating our own wildfire as well. We also constructed our own version of a boom sprayer using a PVC pipe, Driscoll pipe, a tank for water, a tank for herbicide, an electric pump that we wired it to the actual battery of the UTV so we could pump out the herbicide out of the Driscoll pipe. And this level of, I guess, MacGyvering allowed us to follow up with a secondary spray 2.5 weeks after our original work to ensure that the grass was actually like knocked back. And we used a pre-emergent here so we wouldn't have to follow up as often after this. And so due to the proximity of this fuel break to the highway, we had appropriate signage and we instructed the different crew members that were there at different times what to say to the public just in case someone came by and was curious about what was going on. And so also another major component of this was that So weed eating in the sun is pretty hard work. Having the crew switch out which tasks they were doing in between treating the grass and weed eating actually helped a lot and helped reduce fatigue while we were going through this area. So after planning out and implementing the project, we were left with our 2.1-mile fuel break. We treated a few different types of weeds, including a little bit of fountain grass, and then a good chunk of haulicoa, and then it was mainly buffalo grass that we went through. And we did this by following that existing utility pole line. So about 3 months after our secondary treatment, we started to see regrowth of haulicoas, but learning how to build this boom sprayer the way we did will allow us to treat the area way faster and continuously, basically way faster than we would use with a backpack. So I think that was something that we learned and a tool that we're going to definitely use in the future. And then I guess apart from having more guys with more weed whackers, we could have maybe used some larger mowers, but I guess an issue with that would have been access to different parts, just because it's so rocky, and trailering in driving mowers would have been pretty tough. So I do think we did a pretty good job of selecting the right method of how to go through it, and yeah, going through it in that method, I think, was the most efficient way that we could. So yeah, I'd like to give a special thanks to you guys at Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization and Queen Emma Land Company to allow us to provide this service to the surrounding Kauai community and South Kohala as a whole. Yeah, that was all the slides I have.
Okay,
for
mahalo,
today.
Robbie. Elizabeth, you want to post some questions?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Q&A and I'm seeing that there are questions in different directions. So if I don't answer it verbally, we can, continue to type things out. But there is one question about, in the direction of best practices for what makes a sufficient fire break. And first, fire breaks and fuel breaks are actually different. So some definitions: fire break is usually down to the bare soil. Fuel break is an area with fuels reduced, but it typically takes management to keep that in place. And but there are pros and cons to each. You use them each in different sort of ways. And then, yes, it does depend on the vegetation, its condition, its density, how high it is. But best practice is usually 2 to 3 times as wide as however that grass or whatever it is tall. And so in our shorter grasses, 30 feet is more than sufficient. And then in tall, if you can imagine super tall trees, you'd be thinking 2 to 3 times that would need quite a bit more space. So there's a lot of best practices that goes into this. And most of our partners do a lot of learning before they decide what treatment to do. So do you want me to continue with the questions, Melissa?
Yeah, we
There's
have
a lot of them.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
well, so we have a question here about, a question for Robbie about how frequently will it have to be sprayed? Is it possible to make a fuel break without spraying? If you don't mind if I interject for a minute, each area has that we ever work in has a different levels of precipitation and regrowth rate. And so sometimes removing and then spraying keeps that in place for a lot longer. Sometimes it doesn't require as much spraying if it's not going to rain for a while and we're not worried about it coming back. So again, the best practices are usually very site specific. And in other places, yeah, you don't have to spray, but you might have to come back every time it rains or every couple of weeks or months or something like that. So all of that is taken into consideration to figure out how to keep it with a reduced risk for as long as possible and the least broader consequences as possible from all of your prescription methods. So again, there's nuances to figuring out exactly how and what you're going to do. There's some questions about what kind of herbicide to use that has been used, and a repeat question asking if Robbie can talk a little bit more about who he works for and what the setup is. So I'm going to hand it off so that Robbie can answer those questions.
Yeah, so I work for Forest Solutions Inc. Yeah, Forest Solutions, and then we manage Queen Emma Land Company's one of their parcels over there, and yeah, this was done right on the border of their property. Yeah, I could answer, I guess, some of these questions.
Yeah, if you want to talk about herbicide and pre-emergent,
Mhm.
there's a few questions in that direction. Maybe you can talk about
Yeah.
what you use. And-
So we were actually use this as like a area where we're gonna figure out which pre-emergent worked better for us. So we did have one of the sections of the property where we used Oust, and then another section where we used Polaris. Um, and we're gonna monitor which, or I guess which section has regrowth faster, and then we can make our decision based on that. Because the area was mainly grass, so we used a grass specific herbicide, it's fusilade. So yeah, what else there? But
Okay.
if you were looking at some of the other plants that might be in the area, glyphosate would probably be kind of more of like for a wide variety of plants.
I want to go ahead and move to another question that is just asking about learning more about field breaks and how they work, and point to the fact that, you know, our science and best practices information arm of the work that Hawaii Wildfire does, we do in conjunction with the University of Hawaii. Clay Triernicht is on the call here too. You can see his name. And so Pacific Fire Exchange has done a lot of educational publications on that. So you can follow up and also stay tuned because we frequently have webinars and workshops related to fuels management.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any of these questions as well if you guys want to like email me.
I think that's a good path forward. So if you,
that would be great. Robbie, you want to put your email?
Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say that a huge goal of these talk stories, typically we have less people, but part of it is to build relationship and build connections and build the conversation among us all, because we're all in this and we're all trying to learn together and move forward together. So the more we can communicate and partner moving forward, the better. So I do want to invite any of our speakers, if they're willing to keep the conversation going offline. That's always beneficial to our collective effort. Thank you, Robbie. So if you notice in the chat, he put his email. Thanks for making yourself available for that.
Yeah, I think there's one last little one where you have another minute, Robbie, which is what line are you using for your weed whackers?
So okay, actually this is a good question. So we use big commercial grade weed eaters, so we don't have a problem with using like the biggest cord available. I guess the two ones that we tend to use is basically Oregon Super Twist, and then the Oregon the square one. I don't know what the name of that one is, but it's the ones with the wire in between with plastic around it. We found that those hold up way better, especially in the really rocky areas. And I guess I've talked to some of the people at the landscaping stores, and they're more worried about having the machine get bogged down, whereas we found that when you're working in these rocky areas, the cord gets eaten up way faster. So it's almost like necessary that you have that thicker cord to work with. But I would definitely, if you're using more of like a home weed eater, you might want a smaller cord. But the definitely a big thing was not using a blade, because that would have just sparked up everywhere, every single rock we hit. So that was
super important. Thank you so much, Robbie. Keep your questions coming. We love it. We're going to move on to our next guest here. That would be Jeremy Makepa. And Jeremy is on the island of Kauai. He is with Aina Alliance. Since 2021, Kauai Fire Department Prevention Bureau has been working with Department of Hawaiian Homelands to coordinate County Public Works and the State Division of Forestry and Wildlife to cut approximately 10 to 15 miles of strategic firebreak roads to limit the fire spread in the Anahola area. So we're excited to hear from you, Jeremy. If you want to just come on, great. And yeah.
All right, hello everybody. I'm gonna pop up a share screen real fast to keep my thoughts organized. All right, guys can see that? Okay, so I'm from the island of Kauai. If you're not familiar with Kauai, I also live in the area of Anahola. And when I started working in the Fire Prevention Bureau for the Kauai Fire Department, it was one of the most frequent areas for brush fires on the island. And since it was my backyard, I would figure why not start with the hardest place to control fires, which is the closest place to my house, and see what we can do with it. So this is the Anahola fire mitigation and hazard plan, because there's a lot of other hazards that we found within this area. So quick introduction again for me. My name is Jeremy Makepa. I am the president of Aina Alliance. I've been with the Kauai Fire Department for 20 years. I'm a fire captain here on Kauai. I'm an Anahola resident, Hawaiian Homestead leasee, and I was in charge of coordination of multiple state, county, and private organizations to help mitigate the fire hazard in this area. And I wanted to include that I'm a homestead leasee for Hawaiian Homes, because that's helped me be most successful in dealing with Hawaiian homelands, because a lot of this land area that is unmanaged was part of the Department of Hawaiian Homeland properties. And being a homestead leasee and also the prevention captain, I was able to hit that problem from both sides. Yeah, from a community aspect as one of their beneficiaries, and also as a official for the county dealing with fire prevention. So that's helped me a lot working with the county and the state and other organizations. So looking at today's participant count, I'm thinking the big numbers are because of what's happening in Lahaina. And people are trying to find out, is our community safe, depending on where you live. Yeah, you see all the headlines all over the state, everybody coming together to try and, help what's happening in Lahaina and Maui. And I think people in Hawaii do a great job of coming together after disasters, but we don't do very well before disasters. So we do a lot of stuff in defense, right? Like for the fire department, we play a lot of defense. Whenever a fire happens, we go and we respond. But we don't do enough to be proactive, right? So what I did is I created Aina Alliance as a nonprofit organization that could play offense, that could go out into the community and find other organizations like Hawaii Wildfire, work with different grant organizations, work with different state and county organizations as an entity, as a nonprofit entity that could, interact with these as a group, as a community group, instead of from the government side. And what I found is it's been very successful as a liaison between both sides of the community back to government and to private organizations. So I think that's what's helped us be successful. So I can play both offense and defense in my role in the fire department, depending on what I see as the problem. So the fire department helps me play defense. Aina Alliance helps me play some offense, so I can do fire breaks and all that kind of stuff. So if you're wondering, is your community safe, I would recommend you look up your area's CWPP, your Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And Hawaii Wildfire has done a great job of putting together some of these wildfire protection plans for every island and most zones. And you can see the wildfire threat to your community based on all kinds of different standards. So they can go over that if they want to, but I would recommend that if you want to find out for your specific community if it's safe, look at the CWPP, Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and see what you can do to keep your community safe. Some of you might have already seen this one house that was left standing in Lahaina. And if you're wondering what you can do besides helping the people in Maui, you can also help yourself. You can protect yourself by using this theory of defensible space. Yeah. Just because I'm part of the fire department, I just wanted to help you with some tips. Look that up. Look up defensible space. This was one house that was left standing in all of the devastation in Maui, and they were able to use this. What it basically breaks down is clean your yard. So the first 30 feet around your house is zone 1. Clear as much as you can. Keep the grass as low as you can in that zone. And then 100 feet from your house, if you can, even if there's bushes in the back, try to see if you can get permission to cut them down and keep it safe. So from the fire department, those are my tips to help keep you safe. So hopefully some of you who came on for that kind of stuff, go home with something that you can look up, do some research on, and find out more. So for us as Aina Alliance, we've had a lot of success in dealing with reducing fires and criminal activities. Not only do we have to deal with fires, but the amount of abandoned cars that have been dumped in this area, the amount of trash that we've hauled out is really significant. And we've had a lot of homeless issues and homeless problems coming in there, which has led to a lot of these problems. And we've been able to reduce all of it through a community effort. So that's been the really big key for us, is community involvement, getting the community involved in what we're trying to do, helping us to clean up. People have been bringing their own machines to help pick up cars, bringing their own UTVs and ATVs and whatever they have, weed eaters. And then we kind of just make it a day, and then we get dumpsters out and everybody comes and picks it up, from the young kids all the way to the old people. They all come out and help us. And then what we found is, now that this area has been getting cleaned up, it's opened up opportunities for culture and connectivity. So we've been able to bring in the local charter schools to do cultural events, and then some of the beaches we've been able to open up for more workshops and stuff like that. So just connecting back to the Aina, connecting back to the people, and getting everybody back on the land is our goal. A lot of the challenges we've had is the significant cost of doing all of this work, because it's such heavy stuff. Yes, big metals, big cars, picking it up. We got to use big equipment. You've seen Robbie using weed eaters. Yeah, we use weed eaters every day, but for the big stuff, we got to bring in really big stuff to move them around. So we're lucky to have partners like HWMO who find funding that, you know, they can help us, and we were able to use some of that funds to move some of the cars out of the way and push some dirt to make some fire breaks around. But you know, that's just one small part of the bigger picture. Right now we're managing over 400 acres of land to try and keep the vegetative fuel and trash for the fuel load around the Anaola area down. So big responsibility for us. And this is basically how we do it. You know, this is a picture of my dad. He roams around there on his ATV with his wagon, picking up rubbish and hauling them in, making sure people are not making trouble back there. So for us, the expensive pile up, you know, just the security alone, being back there and managing a parcel that size it's pretty significant. Landscaping, fuel, we gotta rent our own portable restrooms. There's no water, utilities of any kind back there, and then hauling the trash, bringing in the heavy equipment, doing the maintenance around that stuff, and then running our insurance to make sure, you know, we're covered for liability. So the first thing we wanted to put in was a check-in station so people can go back to the beach, but right now we don't have the roads really done yet. So this stores a lot of our cleanup equipment for the community events, and eventually it will be the shed that would use as our check-in station for anybody who wants to go down to the beach. And then we've been using it for a couple workshops. We get like wood carving classes that happen on Wednesdays over here. And then we had some community meetings, but I see a great opportunity to use this spot for increased community outreach. So the initial grant that we got from HWMO helped us to start clearing the fire break road down to the beach. With the fire department's incident checklist, this was the hot spot for where the fire started, and then the wind blows inland off the beach. So a lot of the fires that happen along this corridor would catch fire here and then move up towards the community. So we figure if we stop the fires where it starts, that's probably the best place to use the funds from HWMO. So that's what we did. And then we tagged that along with a grant from Hawaiian Homes to continue and add fencing and gates to add security to keep people from going into unauthorized areas. And then phase 2 for the Hawaiian Homes grant would take us across the beach, behind any of the possible culturally significant areas, and then still allow vehicle access, but protect from unauthorized areas where people like to dump stuff, adding fence lines and stuff like that. And then phase 3 of the Hawaiian Homes grant would go through and reestablish fire break roads that I had already organized 2 years ago through county and state programs. And then we would be able to go through again and widen those, because over 2 years, the grass had grown in, making our original 30-foot wide fire breaks down to maybe 8 feet wide in some areas. So we got to go back and widen it. We've been using weed eaters for some of the areas, but some is just too thick. So we might be using bigger machines. And then we've been looking at controlled grazing as possible solutions in this area, but the fencing cost is kind of high. So we're looking for grants or partners to help us with that aspect of it. And we're also looking at financial sustainability of running this program by using, low impact activities back here, UTVs for pollution patrol, maybe trails and bike hikes, or adopt a bay for the day, maybe camping and permitting for day passes to generate some income. Because the toilets and long-term service of the area, we need some income to keep this going. Generally, it's been mostly out of pocket from our volunteers and just people helping. So for Aina Alliance, our mission is to convert land liabilities like this into community assets. Eventually, we'd like to have a big building like this where we can store all the equipment that'll help us maintain properties like this, and even more in Anahola. So that's what we do, and then it just helps us build a future. That's all I got. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Jeremy. Elizabeth, do you want to take just a few minutes to address some of the questions?
Well, I answered as many as I could in writing because I thought it might help to allow people to sort of read through. But there are a few that I want to talk about, which, one of something that comes up all the time is that the boilerplate recommendations of 30 feet, that's really to think through where you can make a difference from your home, working out across your yard, for as big or small as that is. And so we always, and the fire science points to this, that you start literally at your roof and eaves, and then work your way out, because as you do that, the most bang for the buck, the best protection is closer in, and then you start to work out as you have time. So if you can only do a little bit, do it close to the home. I always say start inside the home with yourself and your family, make and practice an emergency plan, have your go bag ready, become as informed as possible, pay attention. It really starts with that. And sign up for your emergency alerts. And then you want to start around the home, and you want to think about all the ways that you can convert whatever materials you have, building materials, into non-combustible as you have time and ability and money to do so. So, we think about roofs a lot, but there are easy things other than replacing your roof. with something that's non-combustible that you could even just do this weekend. You know, the gutters around your home, if you have rain gutters, often collect leaf debris and other things. You can clean those out. You can sweep at the base of your home. You don't want to store hazardous materials or combustible materials under your post and pier, lanai, and everything else. And so there's a lot you can do close in, even if you have a small property. We recognize not everyone has 30 feet because our home ignition zones overlap each other in many of our neighborhoods. And then thinking about larger lands, the 30 feet really comes into play because we want to make adequate buffers between structures and community areas and those wildland areas that might be adjacent to communities. So what to do depends on what type of home, what type of property, what type of vegetation that you have. It's not clear everything and no, we're not allowed to have any trees, any shade, any plants. It's not that. It's about good housekeeping. It's about keeping your grass short, getting rid of dead and dying vegetation. You just have to think of what would happen if an ember is traveling in the wind and it lands. You don't want it landing in that pile of leaves that has been there and you could have removed it. You want to remove any chance for an ember to just have such an easy way to ignite a structure or yard. And that is just the good housekeeping that, you know, that we heard about. So we have a lot of information on that. You can also look in the Ready, Set, Go action guide that's available statewide. That's endorsed by all our fire agencies. So I just wanted to point out that we understand people live in small areas, but you have a lot of agency and a lot of power to actually do a lot, even if you have a small home or lot. So that is one answer. And another, when we're thinking about permanent fire and field breaks, at the moment, we're doing a lot of vegetation management, which requires maintenance. But over time, you know, we sort of have this vision of having our subdivisions designed more creatively with wildfire adaptation and resilience built in. You know, we always use the example of Waikalua Village, which was built with on the windward side where fires mostly come from, the homes protect the golf course. And had it been built at a time when wildfire awareness was higher and if we had subdivision design codes, we could have done it the opposite way where the golf course could have been protecting the homes. So when we're thinking of fuel breaks, permanent design, how can we make these sustainable? There's a lot of creative ways to do that. You know, we can convert to vegetation that's less fire prone, that's less combustible, that doesn't dry out. We can convert some of those areas to permanent grazing buffers or corridors. We can make it a community green space, dog parks, like you name it. There's a lot of things we can do to reduce risk around at our interface between the wildland and community areas that could be sustained over time because they're built into community life. At the moment, though, we have a patchwork of private land ownerships. We don't have that built into all subdivision designs. So we're kind of having to retrofit and just do whatever we can to reduce risk. So I want to encourage everybody to be thinking what our long game can be and what kinds of things we can put into place so that fuel break and fuel reduction that we'd like to see is actually built in, and it's something that can be sustained and maintained over time.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think we have to move on, but I do want to just ask Jeremy one super quick question because I'm interested in scale for that phase 2 of putting that network of field breaks through. Just approximately how much acreage we're talking about, because you're doing this really in your capacity as sort of nonprofit person, right? And so I'm just kind of curious about size and then, you know, your time thinking through this.
So the total area that we're responsible for is about 430 acres.
Wow.
And the total network of fire break roads is about 10 miles.
Awesome. Amazing. Okay. I'm so sorry. We gotta keep moving because we want to invite Erin Payton to come on here. Erin is with Paniolo Hale. So mahalo, Jeremy. And I'm going to just read a short little intro about Erin. So she is with Paniolo Hale on Molokai and has helped to coordinate community-wide awareness and educational activities to increase wildfire risk reduction actions and overall preparedness. She's also one of Hawaii Wildfire's community wildfire ambassadors, sharing resources and information with residents and communities across Molokai. So Erin, I'm going to just go ahead and share screen here, and you just tell me when you want me to keep going here.
Great, thank you.
Through slides.
So I've only been in Hawaii for 6 years. And I found myself working with wildfire, not something I had done before. But what I have learned in doing this is to know the history of the land and talk to people who have lived here and read those reports like what Jeremy was talking about, the CWPP has really been beneficial. So a little history of where I'm at is I'm lower west end of Molokai. So about a little over 100 years ago, it was primarily ranch land. They were grazing cattle. So they brought in a lot of fodder, which is grasses and koas, which leaves today less than 10% endemic plants. So we have a lot of fuel for fires on the west end here. Not only that, there's 3 condos and about 100 single family homes. And in the past, the main gulch that runs through the land has been used to dump. So that's also the area where historically, if we have a wildfire, the wildfire goes down this gulch. Those fuels add to the fire risk. And where it lets out is right near where I live at Poniolahale. But then the winds shift, and the winds shift towards the other condos and then to the homes. So when we're looking at a project, Melissa, please go to the next slide. We're looking at things, the known factors. So this is a list of things that were in some of these documentations. So this gives us an idea of what we need to come in and work with. And not only that, to know the different landowners, what their concerns are, what their needs are, and put together a plan that can benefit the greater whole. So knowing that the condos are in the middle of a 160-acre golf course that was abandoned many years ago, it's not maintained. It's another huge fuel load. Knowing that the stringer of trees near Poniolahale would be our first defense is where we started. We did put in a fuel break, which also doubles as an access road for the fire department. With this particular project, we put in 2 access roads, one on either side of Poniolahale, which buffers for the other condos and then the other homeowners. Also, some of the things we needed to consider was that we don't have a fire station down here. So the minimum response time is 30 minutes. It makes you own the area. In other words, if you're not going to do something and you're not going to work with the private landowners and you're not going to work with the fire department, you're really at risk for losing your structure and losing your families. So being able to reach out to partners is critical, not blaming anybody, but hearing what they have to say, because we all have restrictions on what we can do and what resources are. Melissa, next slide, please. If you look at the map, this is something that was provided to us with the Forestry Service. We started a few years ago working on areas that would be most beneficial with limited resources. So the yellow areas are where we put the access roads. These were the higher risk areas. So knowing the nature of the winds, knowing the nature of historic wildfires, these would be our first defense. These have been cut to 50 feet from structure. The grasses were lowered, the trees were mulched in place. We're using a model that was done on the Big Island where because we have so many koa trees, we can use the mulch to help suppress future growth of grasses and more trees. And this is about a 4 or 5 year project of dumping these the mulch on these access roads to really prevent growth. So we'll be watching them and maintaining them for a few years. Where you see the blue stars, those are the access roads. The green is fuel breaks. We were able to put in 4 fuel breaks. Where the yellow stars are, there was a stringer high fuel load at Paniolo. So Paniolo reduced those. It was bougainvillea that was growing and cascading into the wash. So those have been cut up and thinned. The area where the red is a project that had heavy fuels at Molokai Ranch. That's on their land. The structures near it are all abandoned. So that was construction debris, a lot of green waste. And they went in and removed that a few months ago. They're also starting where the pink stars are. They're starting to go in and make what they call a vehicle ignition zone. They cut grasses away from the road so that if a car pulls over, the grasses aren't tall. It's less chance of catching fire. Next slide, please. When we started the project, the picture on the upper left hand gives you an idea of how the grasses and trees were. We thinned them out again so the fire trucks could get to us, and so that if a fire comes through, this is an area that's a defensible space. Wood chips are low to the ground. Fire would be low to the ground. It's not crawling up the trees. We don't have a ladder fuel issue in doing it this way. Next slide, please. Over the years, the way we've gotten rid of green waste on the west end is to pile it. So that creates a lot of fuel loads, and much of that was in the 30 to 100 foot range of both lived in and abandoned structures. So now that is cleared up to 50 feet, in some cases 100 feet. We removed or mulched in place. Majority was mulched in place. Next slide. This is the bougainvillea I was telling you about. In the partnership, Paniolo trimmed. We hired a big equipment operator. He went in and retrieved whatever is in the wash, mulched it on the other side. On the other side is not only golf course, but owned by Molokai Ranch. Next slide. What it looked like before we went in and trimmed trees. A lot of this is dead wood that is broken. We didn't remove the trees. We just removed the dead limbs. And we lowered grasses. We raised the crowns of the trees. And then we mulched it on this fuel break. I don't know if there's another slide or not, Melissa. But that's it. There was about 4,500 cubic yards of green waste that was mulched. There was a lot of fuel load for fire that was mitigated through this. It took quite a few of us to do this partnership. There's working with Molokai Ranch, with West Molokai Association, Condos or Kainani Kai, Kapui Beach Resort, and Paniolo. We also worked with Ho'olehua Fire Department, which is our nearest fire department, the Molokai Police Department, State of Hawaii Forestry Management, Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization. Fortunately for me, I have a gentleman who's a retired battalion chief who advised me. He's the one who told me about the model for the access road and mulching in place. And then our local landscape contractor who ran the big equipment. This sort of work can't be done without everybody communicating. So really, the only role I provided was making sure that everything was bridged and everybody had the same information. I put together reports that went out to everyone so they could look it over and make sure I was understanding their needs and their concerns. Since we have so many trees here and really nowhere to dispose of our green waste, to mulch it in place made sense for us. Some of the things that were really critical to the process was started with the FireWise program in 2019, which has allowed us to build trust with our neighbors. Such a big part of it is communication and trust. If there's ever a wildfire, you need people to recognize you, recognize the work that's been done, so that they can trust when you're asking them to leave a fire. Or, you know, if you're stuck in the fire, we have a plan now where we can all gather together. We have a plan A, B, and C that the fire department and the police department are aware of. And we try to keep our residents up to date with that information. So trust is, I believe, the main ingredient that brought this together, because that allows for open communication and for people to share their concerns. Something else I find really important is to ask yourself and those involved what the unintended side effects could be in going in, whether it's erosion or causing potential fire, like with the sparks. And to keep whatever work you've done on hand, so the report that you put together, or you're communicating with everyone, it seems that no matter how many meetings you hold, there's still going to be questions after the fact. So the report is a very good resource to be able to reference for yourself and for others, so that there's not miscommunication. There's a lot of fear associated around fire. There's a lot of fear associated with changing of things to mitigate wildfire. So knowing that, I think, helps to stay focused and stay calm when you're helping with people who aren't as focused. Few things learned in this was we did flyers to let everybody know that we were going to be doing the mitigation work, that there was large equipment, and that there is a safety zone, to not only respect the work that's being done, but to keep people safe. That proved to be a little difficult on a small island where everybody knows each other and wants to know or give their 2 cents. So I think going into it, I would do a larger buffer zone, a safety zone with cones, maybe tape it off so that the heavy equipment operators weren't having to stop, explain the work. I think that was probably one of our greatest roadblocks in the process of the work. And then to leave a large enough window for a completion date, because since we're so small and we don't have a lot of large equipment, we were doing this when we had heavy rains. And so sometimes our heavy equipment operators had to go and clean up mudslides or clear out culverts. To allow that to happen and not be worried about tight time constraints was very important to get this done. And that's part of talking to people and having an understanding of their concerns and writing up the proposal. It's very helpful. And having the support of people like Hawaiian Wildfire Management Organization is everything. So thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you so much, Erin. We just have one site-specific question, which has to do with water, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Water and water access, where you guys live.
That is an ongoing issue. We are private land. Recently, the water has become in control of Maui County. There is, as we speak, a group of people working with what our water will look like in the future. Public has been able to speak. Fortunately, that allowed me to say we need enough water to have enough pressure for our fire hydrants. It's not just drinking water. It's not just ag water. So it's a question I don't have an answer to. It's a question that Maui County doesn't have an answer to as of yet. But I understand they were hoping to have it to us this year. It might be next year.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm just looking at the time, realizing we're just a few minutes over. So mahalo to all of our presenters. And Elizabeth, you want to just lead us up with a closed summary real quick and what folks can expect next?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much to our speakers, not just for presenting today, but like I said, for coordinating, for building the trust, for working across multiple land ownerships, multiple partners. You guys are amazing and are really helping us all collectively learn what this takes. And I want to echo what Erin shared, which is, I've heard a lot people say progress only moves at the speed of trust in Hawaii. And that's a huge part of this is partnership, teamwork, trust, relationship building, communication, education, co-planning. And so we are so thankful to have so many partners on board who are in it to help us figure out how to get all of that done. You saw examples of, fire department, Hawaiian homesteads, private lands, and contractors, and folks doing it themselves, and all sorts of examples. And so I think this is such a really important beginning to paving the way for larger, scaled up, collaborative fields management. So with that, this is just the beginning. And we hope that we look back at this and think like, wow, we started so small, but it's so good now. So help us get there. And then also following this immediately, more in the near term, we are slammed. So give us a little patience in getting this out, but we will follow up with an email that includes information from today's talk, and includes some of the other links that went out in the chat and in the Q&A. So look forward to that. It'll be in your email soon. Like I said, we're just totally maxed up, but we want to get all this to you. So you will get that in your email if you signed up. And we look forward to hearing from you, and keep in mind there's lots of other good stuff going on that you can get involved in. So you can look at our websites, hawaiiwildfire.org, pacificfireexchange.org if you want the best practices and science kind of information. And then let's be in touch. So thank you again to everybody, and thank you to Nani and Melissa for helping to coordinate all the logistics today, and Forest Service, our funders who helped contribute to these projects we got to hear about.